I never imagined a Christmas celebration could shatter my world so completely. As I stood in my mother-in-law Patricia's lavishly decorated Seattle home that fateful December night, watching the clock tick towards midnight, I had no idea that every beautifully wrapped gift she'd given me would become weapons in her cruel game of control. The twinkling lights of the Christmas tree cast shadows across her face as she systematically stripped away not just the presents, but the last shreds of my dignity. The raindrops pelting against the windows of the Mitchell family's craftsman home seemed to echo the tears I'd been holding back all evening. Earlier that day, everything had seemed perfect. The carefully arranged presents under the tree, the smell of Patricia's famous apple cider, the sound of carols playing softly in the background. But perfection, as I'd learned in my 5 years of marriage to Ryan, was just another way his mother maintained her iron grip on our lives. I can still hear Patricia's voice dripping with false sweetness as she gathered everyone in the living room just before midnight. "Emma, darling," she'd said, her perfectly manicured fingers trailing along the stack of opened gifts beside me. "Since you clearly don't appreciate the thought I put into selecting these presents, I think it's best if I take them back." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. The afternoon had started typically enough. The Mitchell family gathered in their spacious living room, the Space Needle visible through the large bay windows, its outline blurred by the constant Seattle drizzle. Patricia had orchestrated everything, as usual, from the seating arrangement to the precise order in which gifts would be opened. I sat beside Ryan on the plush leather sofa, trying to ignore the way his mother's eyes followed my every move. Let me take you back to how it all began, to the moment when my mother-in-law's facade finally cracked, revealing the cruel truth that had been hiding behind her perfectly composed smile. A truth that would force me to recognize my own worth and find the strength to walk away from a family that had slowly been suffocating me with their wealth, their status, and their impossible expectations. The first sign that something was different about this Christmas came during dinner. Patricia had outdone herself with the decorations, transforming her already elegant dining room into something out of a luxury magazine. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier, and the fine china gleamed against the crisp white tablecloth. But there was an edge to her smile that made me uneasy, a glint in her eyes that seemed almost predatory. I'd spent hours selecting thoughtful gifts for everyone, especially Patricia. Working with my modest marketing salary, I'd carefully budgeted for months to afford the vintage brooch she'd been eyeing at her favorite antique store in Pike Place Market. When she opened it, her smile never reached her eyes. "How quaint," she'd said, setting it aside without a second glance. "I suppose it's the thought that counts." Ryan, my husband, just chuckled and squeezed my hand, mistaking my hurt for embarrassment. He didn't notice, or chose not to notice, the way his mother's words cut like knives. He never did. In his world, his mother could do no wrong. The successful tech executive was still very much his mother's son, blind to her subtle cruelties. The gift-opening ceremony, as Patricia insisted on calling it, proceeded with military precision. Ashley, my sister-in-law, exclaimed over her new designer handbag. Brandon and Lauren received keys to a timeshare in Hawaii. Ryan opened a small envelope containing tickets for a luxury golf retreat. Each gift was perfectly chosen, perfectly wrapped, and perfectly aligned with Patricia's vision of what her family should be. Then came my gifts, a designer dress that was 2 sizes too small. "I thought you might be motivated to make some changes, dear." An expensive cookbook, since you clearly need help in the kitchen. A spa membership. Everyone could use a little improvement. Each gift felt less like a present and more like a carefully crafted criticism, wrapped in glittering paper and tied with sharp-edged ribbon. The tension in the room grew thicker as midnight approached. Patricia kept checking her watch, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the crystal face of her timepiece. The others seemed oblivious, caught up in their own excitement. But I felt it. The building storm, the quiet before the thunder. At exactly midnight, Patricia stood up, smoothing her silk blouse with practiced precision. "Well, Emma," she said, her voice carrying that false sweetness that had become so familiar over the years. "Since you've made it quite clear that you don't appreciate the thought and expense I've put into your gifts, I think it's best if I take them back. After all, we wouldn't want them to go to waste." The room fell silent. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but said nothing. Ashley stared at her phone, suddenly fascinated by its screen. Brandon and Lauren exchanged quick glances before finding intense interest in their wine glasses. Richard, my father-in-law, simply sighed and took another sip of his scotch, well practiced in the art of avoiding conflict. I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Patricia's smile turned razor sharp. "Oh, come now, dear. The way you barely looked at the dress, how you set aside the cookbook without even reading the inscription, the complete lack of enthusiasm for the spa membership. It's clear these gifts are wasted on you. Someone who truly appreciated them would show proper gratitude." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks as she began gathering the gifts, her movements deliberate and precise. "Perhaps next year you'll learn to show appropriate appreciation for the generosity of others. Though, given your background, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at your lack of refinement." Each word was perfectly chosen, perfectly aimed to wound. I looked at Ryan, silently pleading for him to say something, anything. He cleared his throat, shifted in his seat, and then said, "Mom's right, Emma. You could have shown more enthusiasm." That was the moment something inside me broke. Or perhaps it was the moment something inside me finally came alive. Years of subtle digs, carefully crafted insults, and calculated humiliations crystallized into perfect clarity. I stood up, my movements calm despite the trembling in my hands. "You're right, Patricia," I said, my voice steady. "I clearly don't appreciate these gifts the way you think I should. In fact, I don't appreciate any of this anymore." If you're enjoying this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to hear more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because this was just the beginning of a night that would change everything. The chill that ran through me as Patricia methodically collected the gifts wasn't from the draft seeping through the bay windows of their Seattle home. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The signs had been there since the day Ryan first brought me home to meet his family 3 years ago. The way Patricia's eyes had swept over my simple dress, the slight curl of her lip when she learned I worked in marketing for a small local firm, the backhanded compliments about how brave it was to choose a career over starting a family right away. Each holiday, each family gathering, each Sunday dinner had been an exercise in endurance. Patricia's weapon of choice was always words, carefully selected and precisely delivered. "Oh, Emma dear, that's such an interesting choice of outfit. I suppose that's what's fashionable in your circles." Or, "The casserole is certainly creative. Not everyone can master traditional cooking techniques." Ryan never noticed, or perhaps he chose not to notice. Growing up in the shadow of his mother's expectations had trained him well. To him, her behavior was normal. Her criticisms were just mom being mom. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd brush it off. "You're being too sensitive," he'd say. "That's just how she shows she cares." But tonight was different. As Patricia continued her midnight collection, meticulously gathering each gift she'd given me over the past year, not just the Christmas presents, she began a running commentary. "The pearl earrings from your birthday, clearly wasted. The cashmere sweater from our spring shopping trip, barely worn. The designer bag from our family vacation, stuffed in the back of your closet." Each item had a story. Each story was a criticism, and each criticism was a tiny cut to my self-worth. The rest of the family watched in uncomfortable silence. Ashley pretended to be absorbed in her phone, though I could see her filming the entire scene. Brandon and Lauren suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating, while Richard retreated further into his leather armchair, his scotch glass a shield against the unfolding drama. "And this," Patricia said, holding up the silver bracelet she'd given me for our last anniversary. This was a family heirloom, my grandmother's. Clearly, I was mistaken in thinking you would understand its significance. I watched as she placed each item into a large shopping bag, the rustling of tissue paper punctuating her words like exclamation points. The moonlight streaming through the windows caught the silver bracelet as it disappeared into the bag, and I remembered the day she'd given it to me.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She'd made a show of it at the family dinner, presenting it with a speech about tradition and family values. Now I understood. It had never been a gift. It had been a test, one she'd already decided I would fail. "You know, Emma," Patricia continued, her voice taking on that educational tone she'd perfected during her years as a school principal, "in our family, we have certain standards, expectations. When Ryan brought you home, I tried to help you understand them, to guide you. But some people..." She paused, letting the silence fill with unspoken judgment. "Some people simply aren't capable of rising to the occasion." The grandfather clock in the corner chimed, its deep resonance filling the room. Midnight had passed, and with it, any pretense of this being a normal family Christmas. I sat there, watching as years of gifts disappeared into shopping bags, each one representing a moment when I'd tried and failed to meet Patricia's impossible standards. The designer clothes that never quite fit right, chosen to remind me that I didn't fit their mold. The cookbooks and hosting guides, selected to highlight my inadequacies as a wife and hostess. The spa packages and beauty treatments, carefully, picked to underscore that I wasn't quite polished enough for their world. As I watched Patricia methodically strip away these material representations of her disapproval, something strange happened. Instead of feeling diminished, I felt lighter. Each item she reclaimed seemed to take with it a bit of the weight I'd been carrying, the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't. The rain outside had intensified, drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Seattle's familiar gloom felt oddly comforting now, a contrast to the artificial warmth of the Mitchell family Christmas. Through the window, I could see the Space Needle in the distance, its lights piercing through the mist like a beacon. "I suppose we should discuss the jewelry set you wore at the Carlton Charity Gala," Patricia continued, her voice cutting through my thoughts. "The one that coordinated so perfectly with the family pieces. I had hoped it might help you understand the importance of presentation, of maintaining certain appearances. Clearly, that message was lost." I touched my bare neck, remembering the weight of that necklace, how it had felt like a collar. Patricia had selected it, along with the dress, the shoes, the evening bag. She'd orchestrated my entire appearance that night, positioning me like a doll in her elaborate display of family perfection. "And let's not forget the art pieces we selected for your living room," she added, making a note in her phone. "They'll need to be collected. One can't expect someone with your background to truly appreciate fine art, but I had hoped exposure might cultivate some sense of taste." Each word was calculated, each pause precisely timed for maximum impact. This wasn't a spontaneous action. Patricia had been planning this moment, probably for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity to demonstrate her power, to remind everyone present of her position as the family's gatekeeper. Ryan still sat beside me, his silence a betrayal, louder than any words could have been. He'd learned from childhood that survival in this family meant aligning with his mother, and tonight was no different. His hand rested limply on the armrest between us, a physical representation of the growing distance between us. "Mom," Ashley ventured, finally looking up from her phone. "Maybe this isn't the best time." "On the contrary," Patricia cut her off smoothly. This is exactly the right time. The new year is approaching, and it's important to clear away disappointments before they can taint fresh beginnings. The way she said disappointments made it clear she wasn't just talking about the gifts. In her mind, I was the disappointment, the flaw in her perfectly curated family portrait. 3 years of trying to mold me into her image of the perfect daughter-in-law had failed, and now she was methodically erasing the evidence of that failure. I watched as she moved through the room with practiced efficiency, noting down items, to be collected later. The artwork in the entryway chosen to elevate our home's aesthetic. The wine rack she'd selected because every proper hostess needs a curated collection. The china set that had been a housewarming gift, still in its boxes because it never felt right for our casual dinner parties. Each item represented a moment when I'd tried to fit into their world and failed. The designer clothes that made me feel like I was wearing a costume. The jewelry that felt heavy with expectations. The home decor that turned our comfortable house into a showroom. As Patricia continued her inventory, memories of other family gatherings surfaced. The Easter brunch where she'd commented on my unique approach to table setting. The Thanksgiving dinner where she'd stepped in to rescue my turkey preparation. The countless Sunday dinners where every bite was seasoned with criticism. The rain outside had settled into a steady downpour, nature's accompaniment to this carefully orchestrated drama. Through the window, I could see the city lights blurred by the rain, creating halos of color in the darkness. Somewhere out there was the small marketing firm where I'd worked before marriage, the coffee shops where I used to meet friends, the life I'd gradually let slip away in my efforts to meet Patricia's standards. "I think that covers everything of significance," Patricia finally announced, closing her notes with a decisive tap. "Though I'm sure there are numerous smaller items I've overlooked. We can address those another time." The room remained silent, the other family members still frozen in their chosen poses of studied indifference. The only sound was the gentle rustle of tissue paper as Patricia adjusted the bags of reclaimed gifts, arranging them with the same precision she applied to everything in her life. "Well," she said, smoothing her silk blouse with practiced grace, "I think this has been a valuable lesson for everyone. The importance of gratitude, of understanding one's place, of respecting family traditions." Her eyes met mine, cold and calculating. Some people simply aren't equipped to appreciate genuine generosity. In that moment, watching Patricia stand, amid her collected bounty like a general surveying conquered territory, something shifted inside me. The careful walls I'd built to contain my true feelings began to crumble, and in their place, something new began to grow. Something that felt surprisingly like strength. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the room like a signal. Outside, the Seattle rain continued its steady rhythm, washing away the old year's pretenses. As I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of Patricia's calculated cruelty, I realized that she had given me one final, unintended gift: clarity. "I'll help you move your things to the car, Mom," Ashley said, breaking the thick silence that had settled over the room. Her voice seemed unnaturally loud against the backdrop of rain pattering against the windows. Patricia nodded approvingly at her daughter's show of support, but I barely registered the interaction. My attention was fixed on the sterling silver picture frame she now held in her perfectly manicured hands, our wedding photo. "This too, I think," Patricia murmured, turning the frame over as if inspecting it for flaws. After all, it was a gift from me, selected to celebrate what I hoped would be a perfect union. Her emphasis on the word hoped cut through the room like a knife. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with the dramatic flare of breaking glass or a thunderclap, but with the quiet certainty of a lock clicking into place. I stood up, my movements measured and deliberate, feeling oddly calm despite the hurricane of emotions swirling inside me. "Keep it," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Keep all of it. The clothes that were never quite right, the jewelry that felt like shackles, the artwork that was meant to elevate our home. Keep every single thing you ever gave me with strings attached. The room fell deadly silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Patricia's expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, perhaps? Or irritation at this deviation from her carefully orchestrated scene. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but remained silent, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Emma," Patricia recovered quickly, her voice taking on that condescending tone she reserved for particularly trying moments. "You're being dramatic. This is precisely the kind of emotional overreaction that proves my point about your unsuitability." I laughed then, a sound so genuine it startled everyone in the room, including myself. "No, Patricia. For the first time since I married into this family, I'm seeing things with perfect clarity. Each gift, each generous gesture, was just another way to remind me that I didn't belong here, that I would never be good enough." Moving with purpose now, I walked to the collection of bags where she'd stored her reclaimed treasures. One by one, I began adding items she'd missed: the diamond studs I wore tonight, the designer watch from last Christmas, even the delicate gold necklace that had been her first gift to me. "Emma, stop this nonsense," Ryan finally spoke, his voice strained. "You're embarrassing yourself. Mom's right. You never did know how to show proper appreciation." His words, meant to sting, instead felt like the final confirmation I needed. I turned to face him, really looking at my husband for the first time that night. The man I'd fallen in love with was somewhere beneath that polished exterior, but he'd been buried so deep under years of his mother's conditioning that I wondered if he'd ever find his way out. "Proper appreciation," I repeated slowly, letting the words sink in. "Is that what you call this, Ryan? This annual ritual of humiliation dressed up as generosity? These gifts that come with price tags made of criticism and disappointment?" Patricia drew herself up to her full height, her pearl necklace gleaming in the soft light. "Now, see here, young lady. Everything I've done has been to help you fit into this family, to give you the refinement and social graces you so clearly lacked. If you choose to see that as criticism, well, that only proves my point." I shook my head, feeling an odd sense of pity for this woman who measured love in designer labels and social standings. "No, Patricia. Everything you've done has been to control me, to remake me in your image. But here's the thing. I'm not your dress-up doll. I'm not your project. And I'm not your victim anymore." The grandfather clock struck the half hour, its deep chime reverberating through the room. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered through the rain-streaked windows, each light a reminder that there was a whole world beyond these suffocating walls. "If you walk out that door," Patricia's voice was steel-wrapped in silk, "don't expect to be welcomed back. The Mitchell family has standards, traditions, expectations. We've tolerated your inadequacies long enough." I turned to face her one last time, taking in the scene before me. Patricia, standing amid her collected bounty like a queen presiding over her court. Ryan, still seated, his face a study in conflicted loyalty. Ashley, Brandon, and Lauren, frozen in their respective poses of carefully crafted indifference. Richard, hiding behind his Scotch glass, a silent witness to yet another family drama. "Goodbye, Patricia," I said simply. "Thank you for finally showing me exactly who you are and reminding me of who I am." I walked to the coat closet, retrieving my worn leather jacket, the one Patricia had tried countless times to replace with something more suitable. My car keys were heavy in my pocket, a tangible reminder of my escape route. "Emma," Ryan called after me, finally standing but making no move to follow. "Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. "We didn't build anything, Ryan. We just lived in the elaborate dollhouse your mother designed, and I'm done playing my assigned role. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, no drama, no slamming, just the soft sound of one chapter ending and another beginning. The rain had lessened to a gentle mist, coating everything in a silvery sheen. My old Honda Civic sat at the end of the driveway, looking out of place among the luxury vehicles that belonged to the Mitchell family. As I walked toward my car, I heard the front door open behind me. "Emma!" Patricia's voice carried across the manicured lawn. "This childish display only proves what I've always said about you. You're not Mitchell material. You never were." I didn't turn around. Instead, I smiled, feeling lighter with each step I took away from that house. She was right about one thing. I wasn't Mitchell material. I was something better. I was myself. The key turned in the ignition, and my car hummed to life. Through the rearview mirror, I could see Patricia still standing in the doorway, Ryan's silhouette visible behind her. They looked like figures in a snow globe, frozen in their perfect pose of wealth and privilege. As I pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the designer gifts and gilded cage they represented, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. The rain-slicked streets of Seattle stretched out before me, each streetlight marking another step toward a future that was suddenly, gloriously, my own to shape. The city sprawled around me, a maze of possibilities. I had no specific destination in mind, but for the first time in years, that didn't terrify me. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave behind the certainty of misery for the uncertainty of hope. My phone began buzzing in my purse, probably Ryan or Ashley or even Patricia herself, unable to let go of the last word. I let it ring. Whatever they had to say could wait. Tonight was about me, about reclaiming my voice, my identity, my life. The Space Needle loomed ahead, its lights piercing through the misty darkness like a beacon. I remembered the first time. I'd seen it, newly arrived in Seattle, full of dreams and ambitions. Somewhere along the way, I'd let those dreams get buried under the weight of Patricia's expectations and Ryan's complacency. But not anymore. Tonight, watching Patricia methodically reclaim her gifts, she'd unknowingly given me the greatest gift of all, the push I needed to reclaim myself. Each item she took back removed another chain binding me to a life that was never truly mine. As I drove through the quiet streets of Seattle, my mind was already racing ahead, making plans. I had my marketing degree, my experience, my skills. All the things Patricia had dismissed as inadequate. They would be my building blocks, the foundation of my new life. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind a clean, crisp night. Above the city lights, a few stars managed to peek through the clearing clouds. I rolled down my window, letting the cool air rush in, carrying away the last traces of Patricia's perfume and the suffocating atmosphere of the Mitchell home. Freedom, I was discovering, has its own scent, like rain-washed streets and endless possibilities. Driving through Seattle's rain-slicked streets at 1 a.m, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The full weight of what I'd just done was starting to sink in. Every stoplight bathed my face in red, reminding me of Patricia's perfectly decorated Christmas tree, now miles behind me. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I left. 14 missed calls from Ryan, 6 from Ashley, and a stream of text messages I couldn't bring myself to read. The neon signs of downtown Seattle blurred together through my windshield as tears finally began to fall. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. The kind that comes when you finally put down a weight you've been carrying for so long you'd forgotten how heavy it was. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the 24-hour diner where I used to meet my friends for late-night coffee before I married Ryan. The same old neon sign flickered above the chrome and glass building, the word Joe's glowing like a lighthouse in the dark. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh after the soft golden glow of Patricia's carefully curated home decor. The waitress looked up as I entered. her name tag reading Marie. She took one look at my face and wordlessly poured a cup of coffee, sliding it across the counter as I sat down. The ceramic mug was chipped, nothing like the fine bone china Patricia insisted was the only proper vessel for hot beverages, and somehow that made it perfect. "Rough night?" Marie asked, her voice kind but not prying. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform had seen better days, but her eyes were warm and understanding. I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting its warmth seep into my cold fingers. "You could say that. I just walked out on my husband and his family on Christmas night." Marie nodded sagely, as if people confessed such things to her every day. Maybe they did. "Sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do," she said, refilling my cup without being asked, especially on holidays. Holidays make everything harder. Looking around the nearly empty diner, I noticed a few other late-night refugees. A truck driver hunched over his plate of eggs, a young couple sharing a piece of pie, an elderly man reading yesterday's newspaper. None of them looked like they belonged in Patricia's world of crystal glasses and designer labels, yet they all seemed more real, more authentic than anything I'd experienced in the past 3 years. My phone buzzed again, Ryan's face appearing on the screen. I turned it face down on the counter. Marie raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just slid a menu in front of me. The laminated pages were sticky with years of use, the prices written and rewritten as times changed. I ordered toast and eggs, the simplest thing on the menu, and felt a strange sense of triumph in making this small decision for myself. "You know," Marie said as she put in my order, "I did something similar 30 years ago. Left my husband on Thanksgiving Day, packed up my kids and drove away while the turkey was still in the oven." She chuckled at the memory. "Best decision I ever made." I looked up at her, really looked, and saw the strength in her lined face, the quiet dignity that had nothing to do with designer clothes or social status. "Weren't you scared?" I asked. "Terrified," she admitted, wiping down the counter with practiced movements. "But I was more scared of staying, of letting my kids grow up thinking that's what love looked like." My toast arrived, slightly burnt around the edges. In Patricia's house, it would have been sent back immediately, accompanied by a lecture on proper food service standards. Here, it was just toast, and I was just hungry. As I ate, I began to think practically for the first time since leaving. I had my own bank account, something Patricia had strongly disapproved of, calling it untrusting, with enough savings to last a few months if I was careful. My car was paid off, another point of contention with the Mitchells, who believed in always having the newest model. I had my marketing degree and 5 years of experience before I'd let Patricia convince me that working wasn't suitable for a Mitchell wife. The diner's radio played softly in the background, old Christmas songs mixing with the clink of cutlery and the hum of conversation. It was so different from the carefully curated playlist Patricia had selected for her party, yet somehow more festive, more real. Marie appeared beside me again, coffee pot in hand. "You got somewhere to go?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes concerned. I shook my head. "Not really. I hadn't thought that far ahead." She nodded, understanding. "My sister works at the Gateway Inn over on Pine Street. Clean place, reasonable rates. Tell her Marie sent you." She scribbled a name and number on her order pad. "And honey, whatever you're running from, you're stronger than you think." The simple kindness of this stranger brought fresh tears to my eyes. In 3 years of Mitchell family gatherings, I'd never experienced such genuine warmth. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Ashley. "Mom's hysterical. Ryan's drinking. Dad's locked himself in his study. Please come back and fix this." Fix this. That had always been my role in the Mitchell family dynamic. Smooth things over, keep the peace, apologize for existing in a way that didn't meet Patricia's standards. Not anymore. I paid my bill, leaving Marie a generous tip, and stepped back into the night. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy under the streetlights. Following Marie's directions, I found the Gateway Inn, a modest 3-story building with a neon vacancy sign burning bright against the dark sky. The night clerk, a woman named Susan who shared Marie's kind eyes, didn't bat an eye at my story. She gave me a room on the 2nd floor, facing away from the street. "First, nights on the house," she said quietly. "Merry Christmas." The room was small and simple. A bed, a dresser, a TV that had seen better days. The bathroom light flickered, and the heating unit rattled. But it was clean. More importantly, it was mine. No Patricia to critique the decor, no Ryan to apologize for its simplicity. I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself to look at my phone. 28 missed calls now, 43 text messages, 1 voicemail from Patricia, its timestamp showing she'd called just minutes after I'd left. With trembling fingers, I played the message. "Emma, your behavior tonight was absolutely inexcusable. The scene you created, the embarrassment you've caused this family, it's beyond comprehension. I've always said you weren't Mitchell material, and you've finally proved me right. Ryan deserves better than this childish display. When you come to your senses, we'll discuss appropriate ways to make amends. Though I doubt you'll ever truly understand the magnitude of your actions tonight." Her voice, so controlled, so certain of her righteousness, had lost its power to wound me. Instead, I felt oddly grateful. Every word confirmed that I'd made the right choice. I looked around the modest hotel room, so far removed from the luxury I'd grown accustomed to. The bedspread was faded, the carpet worn in places. But there was something honest about it. This room didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was, a safe place for the night. Exhaustion suddenly hit me like a physical force. I'd been running on adrenaline since walking out of Patricia's house, but now my body demanded rest. I curled up on the bed, not bothering to change out of my clothes, and let the steady hum of the heating unit lull me into a fitful sleep. Dreams came in fragments. Patricia's face as she collected her gifts, Ryan's silence, Ashley filming the scene on her phone. But mixed with these images were others. Marie's kind smile, Susan's understanding nod, the simple comfort of that. Chipped coffee mup at the diner. I woke to pale winter sunlight filtering through the thin curtains. For a moment, I was disoriented, expecting to see the expensive blackout drapes of my bedroom in the house Ryan and I shared. Then reality rushed back. The midnight gift reclamation, my walk out, the diner, this hotel room. My phone had finally gone quiet, its battery dead. I left it that way, not ready to face whatever new messages the morning had brought. Instead, I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of Patricia's perfectly orchestrated Christmas party. Looking at myself in the steamy mirror, I saw someone different from the woman who had dressed so carefully for last night's gathering. My makeup was gone, my carefully styled hair now falling in natural waves. I looked younger, somehow. More like the woman I'd been before the Mitchells, before I'd learned to calibrate every word and gesture to Patricia's exacting standards. I had no change of clothes, no toiletries beyond the hotel's basic offerings. Everything I owned was back at the house Ryan and I shared. Clothes Patricia had approved, furniture she had selected, art she had chosen. But as I dried off with the thin hotel towel, I realized none of that mattered. Those things had never really been mine anyway. What I did have was my education, my skills, my experience. Patricia might have convinced me to give up my career, but she couldn't take away what I'd learned. What I could do. My mind was already spinning with possibilities. Freelance work, contract positions, maybe even starting my own marketing consultancy. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. For a moment, panic seized me. Had Ryan found me? Patricia? But it was just Susan, offering fresh towels and a sympathetic smile. "Rough night?" she asked, echoing Marie's words from hours before. I nodded, accepting the towels. "But maybe a better morning." She smiled, understanding in her eyes. "That's usually how it goes. Life has a way of sorting itself out once you take that first step." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and Marie called. Said to tell you she's holding a job application behind the counter whenever you're ready. Said something about needing someone with marketing experience to help upgrade the diner's image." I stared at her, surprised by this unexpected lifeline. "She barely knows me." Susan shrugged. "Sometimes strangers see us clearer than family, especially around Christmas." After she left, I stood at the window, looking out over the awakening city. Seattle was coming to life on this post-Christmas morning. People hurrying to sales or returning gifts or meeting friends for coffee. Normal life going on, unaware that my world had shifted on its axis. My dead phone sat on the bedside table, a black mirror reflecting the morning light. In it, I knew, were messages from the Mitchells, demands, guilt trips, probably a few threats. But for the first time in years, their opinions didn't matter. I got dressed in yesterday's clothes, ran my fingers through my damp hair, and headed down to the hotel lobby. Susan gave me directions to the nearest department store. Not the high-end boutiques Patricia favored, but a regular store where regular people bought regular clothes. Walking through the early morning streets, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, possibility. Each step took me further from Patricia's world of rigid expectations and closer to whatever lay ahead. I didn't know exactly what that would be, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The city stretched out before me, full of opportunities I'd forgotten existed. Somewhere out there was a new life waiting to be built. My life, on my terms. And it all started because Patricia decided to take back her gifts at midnight on Christmas. Sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is the realization that you never needed those gifts in the first place. The department store's fluorescent. Lights buzzed overhead as I browsed through racks of sensible, affordable clothing. Each item I selected felt like a small act of rebellion against Patricia's rigid standards. A comfortable sweater in a color she would have deemed pedestrian. On jeans that prioritized comfort over designer labels. Practical boots that would never grace the pages of Vogue. At the checkout counter, I handed over my credit card with only slight hesitation. It was still early. Patricia wouldn't think to freeze our joint accounts until banks opened. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair Patricia would have disapproved of, smiled as she handed me my bags. "Starting fresh?" she asked, noting my lack of winter coat despite the Seattle chill. My reflection caught my eye in the store's window. As I left, someone familiar yet different. The woman staring back at me looked lighter somehow, unburdened. My phone remained dead in my purse, a conscious choice to maintain this peaceful bubble a little longer. The morning air was crisp and clean after last night's rain. Steam rose from coffee cups clutched by early morning commuters, and the space. Needle stood sentinel against the pale winter sky. I found myself walking toward Pike Place Market, drawn by memories of my first years in Seattle, before the Mitchells. The market was just coming alive, vendors setting up their stalls, the scent of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. I bought a cup of coffee from a small stand, not the exclusive roaster Patricia insisted was the only acceptable source, but rich and aromatic and somehow more satisfying. Standing at the market's railing, watching ferries cross Elliott Bay, I pulled out my phone and finally plugged it into my portable charger. The screen lit up with a cascade of notifications that I scrolled through with detached interest. Ryan's messages evolved from angry to pleading to threatening. Ashley's alternated, between guilt trips and offers to fix things. Patricia's were pure ice, each word carefully chosen to maximize impact. But it was the last message that caught my eye, from Marie at the diner. "Job's yours if you want it. Marketing skills and real-world experience both welcome here. No, designer labels required." The market's familiar bustle surrounded me as I typed a quick response to Marie, accepting her offer. I could almost hear Patricia's voice, dripping with disdain at the thought of a Mitchell wife working in a diner. But that voice held no power over me now. The ferries continued their steady dance across the bay, unchanging despite the turmoil of the past 12 hours. Among the morning crowds, I spotted a familiar face, Lisa, my old colleague from the marketing firm I'd left after marrying Ryan. Patricia had deemed it unnecessary for me to work, insisting that a Mitchell wife's role was to manage the household and attend charity functions. Lisa did a double take when she saw me, probably surprised to find me alone at Pike Place on the morning after Christmas. "Emma?" She navigated through the crowd, 2 coffee cups in hand. "I almost didn't recognize you without your usual." She gestured vaguely, indicating the designer outfit and carefully maintained appearance Patricia had insisted upon. I touched my unstyled hair self-consciously, then caught myself. This was Lisa, who had known me before, who had tried to warn me about losing myself in the Mitchell family dynamics. "It's been a long night," I admitted. Lisa studied my face for a moment, then handed me one of her coffee cups. "I was bringing this to the office, but it looks like you need it more. Want to talk about it?" We found a quiet corner in the market, away from the morning rush. The coffee was from a local roaster Patricia would never have approved of, and it tasted like freedom. Lisa listened without interruption as I told her about the midnight gift reclamation, about walking away, about Marie's job offer at the diner. When I finished, Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "You know," she said finally, "we're actually looking for someone to head up our new small business division. Someone who understands both marketing and the real world." She paused, letting that sink in. "The position's been open for a month. We haven't found the right fit." I stared at her, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "Lisa, I haven't worked in marketing for 3 years." She shrugged. "You've been managing the Mitchell family's public image, handling their charity events, navigating Seattle's social elite. Sounds like marketing to me. Different clients, same skills." A ferry horn sounded in the distance, making me jump. Lisa pulled out a business card and scribbled something on the back. "Think about it. The position starts after New Year's." She stood up, gathering her things. "And Emma, it's good to see you again. The real you." I sat there long after Lisa left, watching the market come fully alive around me. Tourists began to filter in, their cameras capturing the iconic signs and stalls. Vendors called out their wares, their voices mixing with the seagulls' cries and the distant ferry horns. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Ryan. "Where are you? We need to talk about this ridiculous behavior. Mom's willing to forgive your outburst if you apologize appropriately." The words that would have sent me into a panic just yesterday now seemed almost comical. Apologize? For what? For finally standing up for myself? For refusing to be molded into Patricia's idea of perfection? I turned off my phone again and walked to the market's flower stalls. The vendor was arranging tulips, not the exotic blooms Patricia insisted on for her dinner parties, but simple, cheerful flowers that reminded me of my grandmother's garden. "Beautiful morning," the vendor said, noticing my interest. She had dirt under her fingernails and laugh lines around her eyes. Patricia would have dismissed her as common. To me, she looked like someone who had figured out what really mattered in life. I bought a small bunch of tulips, their bright colors a contrast to the gray Seattle morning. These would be the first decoration in whatever new space I created for myself. Not chosen to impress anyone, not selected to match any. Carefully curated aesthetic, just flowers that made me smile. The morning had warmed slightly, though Seattle's perpetual mist still hung in the air. I found myself walking toward my old neighborhood, where I'd lived before meeting Ryan. My former apartment building looked exactly the same, a bit worn around the edges, but solid and unpretentious. Mrs. Chen was sweeping the front steps, just like she used to do every morning. She looked up as I approached, recognition dawning on her face. "Emma? Little Emma Wilson?" She set her broom aside and peered at me closely. "You look different." I touched my face self-consciously. "Different bad?" She shook her head. "Different good." "Like you woke up." She studied me for a moment longer. "You know, apartment 3B is coming available next month. The grad student is finishing her program, moving to Boston." My heart skipped a beat. 3B, just down the hall from my old apartment. "Mrs. Chen, are you serious?" She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Rent's gone up some since you lived here, but still reasonable. For Seattle, anyway." She paused, then added, "No designer furniture allowed. Ruins the building's character." Laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in years. Mrs. Chen had always seen through pretense, had warned me about losing myself when I'd moved out to live in Ryan's world of luxury and expectations. Standing there on the familiar steps, surrounded by the sounds and smells of my old neighborhood, I felt pieces of myself clicking back into place. The coffee shop where I used to write marketing proposals was still there. The bookstore where I'd spent countless Sunday afternoons still displayed local authors in the window. The Thai restaurant that had been my go-to for late-night work sessions still had its Christmas lights up year-round. My phone weighed heavy in my purse, full of messages from a world I was rapidly leaving behind. But on my wrist, I still wore my old watch, the one Ryan and Patricia had tried repeatedly to replace with something more suitable. Its worn leather band and slightly scratched face had marked time through college, through my first job, through all the moments when I'd known exactly who I was. Mrs. Chen disappeared inside and returned with a rental application. "No pressure," she said, pressing it into my hands. "But sometimes the universe gives us signs. We're smart if we pay attention." I sat on the building's front steps, where I used to drink my morning coffee and plan my day. The tulips lay beside me, their petals catching the weak winter sunlight. For the first time since walking out of Patricia's house, I let myself really think about the future. Lisa's job offer beckoned, a chance to reclaim my career, to prove that the skills I'd honed before marriage hadn't disappeared under Patricia's influence. Marie's diner job offered something different but equally valuable. A place to land, to catch my breath, to remember what it felt like to do honest work without constant judgment. And now, Mrs. Chen's rental application represented something I hadn't dared hope for, the chance to come full circle, to return to a place where I'd been truly happy, truly myself. Not as a retreat, but as a revival. My phone buzzed again in my purse. Without looking, I knew it would be another Mitchell family message. Perhaps Ashley with another guilt trip, or Ryan with another demand, or Patricia with another carefully worded barb. But their words couldn't reach me here, couldn't touch the peace I'd found on these familiar steps. I pulled out a pen and began filling out the rental application. Each line felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity. My own name, my own job history, my own references. Not Ryan's wife, not Patricia's project, just Emma Wilson, starting over. The morning continued to unfold around me. Neighbors heading to work, delivery trucks making their rounds, life going on as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis last night. But for me, everything had changed. Patricia's midnight gift reclamation had stripped away more than just material possessions. It had stripped away the illusion that I needed any of it. Here, on these steps, with tulips beside me and a rental application in my lap, I was discovering that the best gifts can't be wrapped in expensive paper or tied with designer ribbons. They come in moments of clarity, in rediscovered strength, in the simple joy of choosing your own path. Mrs. Chen came out again, this time with 2 cups of tea. She handed me one without comment and sat down beside me, her presence comforting in its familiarity. Together, we watched the neighborhood wake up. 2 women who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over. The tea was Nothing like the expensive blends Patricia served at her afternoon gatherings, but it warmed me from the inside out. Like everything else this morning, it tasted like freedom. The Gateway Inn's small business center consisted of a single computer and a printer that had seen better days. I sat at the worn desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard as I composed my resignation email to the 3 charity boards Patricia had insisted I join. The morning sun filtered through dusty blinds, casting stripes across the screen as I carefully worded my departure. Susan appeared with a fresh cup of coffee, setting it beside me without comment. The ceramic mug bore the hotel's faded logo, a far cry from the bone china Patricia required for all beverages. "You look like you could use this," she said, her eyes warm with understanding. "And maybe a friendly ear if you want one." My email draft glowed on the screen. "Dear board members, due to unforeseen personal circumstances." The cursor blinked steadily, waiting for me to find the right words to dismantle another piece of my carefully constructed Mitchell life. "I just don't know how to explain it," I admitted, gesturing at the screen. "How do you tell people you've worked with that you're walking away because you finally realized you were living someone else's life?" Susan pulled up a chair, the vinyl creaking softly. "Tell them the truth, not Patricia's version of the truth. Not what they expect to hear, but your truth." Her words struck a chord. For 3 years, I'd filtered every communication through the lens of Mitchell family expectations. Each email, each phone call, each conversation had been carefully crafted to maintain the image Patricia had created. I deleted my draft and started again. This time, the words flowed naturally. "Dear board members, I am writing to tender my resignation, effective immediately. While I have valued our work together, I must step away to focus on rebuilding my own life and career. The past 3 years have taught me much about privilege, responsibility, and the importance of being true to oneself." As I typed, my phone lit up with another call from Ryan. Susan glanced at it, then back at me. "X?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied, letting the call go to voicemail. "But soon." She nodded sagely. "You know, we get a lot of women like you here, usually in the middle of the night, usually around holidays. There's something about Christmas that makes people realize they can't fake it anymore." I hit send on my resignation email, watching it disappear into cyberspace. 3 down, countless more ties to sever. Did they all make it? The other women? Susan's smile was gentle. The ones who stopped trying to please everyone else? Yeah, they made it. The ones who went back, thinking they could fix things? They usually ended up here again, a few months or years later. My phone buzzed with an incoming email, a response from one of the board chairs. I braced myself before opening it, expecting recriminations or guilt trips. Instead, I found understanding. "Emma, I've watched you these past years, always so careful, always so controlled. Whatever has prompted this change, know that you have my support. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is disappoint others to be true to ourselves." Tears blurred my vision. In all my worry about disappointing people, I'd never considered that some might be silently cheering for my escape. The business center's printer whirred to life as I began printing the divorce paperwork I'd downloaded. Each page represented another step toward freedom, another piece of the Mitchell facade crumbling away. "You don't have to do everything today," Susan reminded me, refilling my coffee. "Sometimes just deciding to change is enough for one morning." But I couldn't stop. Years of suppressed independence were surging forward, demanding action. I opened my laptop, my personal one, not the sleek device Ryan had given me, and began updating my resume. 3 years of charity work and social events were transformed into marketable skills: event planning, donor relations, public relations, community outreach. My phone continued its steady stream of notifications. Ashley had posted a family photo from last night on Instagram, carefully edited to show the perfect Mitchell Christmas before everything fell apart. The comments were already flowing in: admiration for Patricia's decor, compliments on the coordinated outfits, praise for the picture-perfect family gathering. Only I knew the truth behind that image, knew what had happened moments after it was taken. Knew how Patricia's smile had turned cruel as she began her midnight collection, how Ryan's protective arm around my waist had offered no protection at all. A new email appeared from Lisa's firm confirming my interview for the small business division position. Real work, real responsibility, real opportunity. Not just a title bestowed to maintain the Mitchell family's social standing. The morning stretched on as I systematically dismantled my old life. Resignation emails to social committees. Cancellation notices to the exclusive clubs Patricia had insisted I join. A carefully worded message to my personal shopper, declining any future services. Each keystroke felt like breaking another link in the golden chains that had bound me to Patricia's world. Through the business center's window, I could see Seattle coming alive with post-Christmas activity. People returning gifts, meeting friends for coffee, living lives unconstrained by the suffocating expectations of wealth and status. My next task was harder: composing an email to my parents. They had watched with quiet concern as I'd gradually disappeared into the Mitchell family orbit, their down-to-earth daughter transforming into someone they barely recognized. How could I explain that their real daughter was finally finding her way back? The words came slowly. Mom and Dad, last night I walked away from my marriage and the Mitchell family. I know this will come as a shock, but in truth, it's been building for years. I lost myself trying to become someone I was never meant to be. A soft knock interrupted my typing. Marie from the diner stood in the doorway, a paper bag in her hands. Susan called, she explained, setting the bag down. Said you'd been holed up here all morning. Thought you might need some fuel. The smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup, my comfort food order from the previous night, filled the small room. You didn't have to, I started, but Marie waved off my protest. That's what friends do, she said simply. And that's what you need now. Friends, not connections or social alliances or whatever those Mitchell people called their relationships. I opened the bag, the familiar diner aroma bringing back memories of college days, of late-night study sessions and early morning meetings, of who I used to be before Patricia decided to remake me in her image. The job's still yours, Marie continued, watching me unpack the lunch. Part-time, if you want to pursue that corporate position too. Sometimes it helps to keep one foot in the real world while you're rebuilding. The idea appealed to me. Balancing corporate marketing with helping a small business grow. Nothing could have been further from Patricia's vision of a Mitchell wife's role, and that made it even more attractive. My phone lit up again, Patricia's number. Without hesitation, I declined the call and blocked the number. Then Ryan's, then Ashley's. Each block felt like sealing another crack in my newly constructed wall of independence. There's an apartment above the diner, Marie mentioned casually. Nothing fancy, but it's furnished. Previous tenant left suddenly. Seems she won the lottery. Or something. It's yours if you want it, at least until you find something more permanent. I looked around the business center, at the scattered papers and empty coffee cups that marked my morning of dismantling and rebuilding. An apartment above a diner would have been unthinkable yesterday. Now it sounded like exactly what I needed. A simple space, free from Patricia's influence, close to people who saw me as I really was. It's a far cry from what you're used to, Marie warned, but I shook my head. What I'm used to nearly destroyed me, I replied. I need something real now. Something that's mine, not the Mitchells. The afternoon sun had replaced the morning light, warming the small room. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the city, traffic and conversations, laughter and life, normal sounds, everyday sounds, so different from the carefully modulated atmosphere of Patricia's world. My phone had finally fallen silent, the blocked numbers no longer able to reach me. In the bacha'i, quiet, I could hear my own thoughts clearly for the first time in years. They weren't perfect thoughts, weren't polished or refined or Mitchell approved. They were messy and real and entirely my own. Susan appeared again, collecting empty coffee cups. "Made some decisions?" she asked, noting the stack of printed papers and the remains of Marie's lunch. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm taking the apartment above the diner, and the job, and the corporate interview. I'm taking my life back, piece by piece." She smiled, understanding. "Good. Just remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." As I gathered my papers and laptop, I caught my reflection in the window. My hair was starting to curl in the way Patricia had always criticized. My new department store clothes were far from designer quality, and my makeup had long since worn off. I looked nothing like a Mitchell wife. I looked like myself. Outside, Seattle continued its post-Christmas bustle, unaware that in a small hotel business center, a woman was reconstructing herself from the ground up. But that was okay. This wasn't about making headlines or maintaining appearances. This was about finding my way back to the person I was always meant to be. One email, one decision, one step at a time. Marie helped me carry my few belongings up the narrow stairs to the apartment above the diner. The space was small but bright, with 2 windows overlooking the busy street below. A worn but clean sofa occupied one corner, a double bed filled another, and a tiny kitchenette lined the far wall. The bathroom was barely big enough to turn around in, and the closet could hardly be called a closet at all. The sound of the diner's morning bustle drifted up through the floorboards, dishes clinking, coffee brewing, the murmur of conversations blending into a comforting hum. So different from the carefully maintained silence of the Mitchell house, where every sound had to be properly modulated and socially acceptable. "It's not much," Marie said, setting down the last bag of my department store purchases. "But it's clean and safe, and the rent includes utilities." She hesitated, then added, "Plus, you'll always have people around. Sometimes that's important when you're starting over." I ran my hand along the kitchen counter, feeling the slight roughness of the laminate surface. In Patricia's world, anything less than granite or marble was considered beneath consideration. But this felt real, solid, honest. A knock at the door made me jump, my nerves still raw from the constant barrage of Mitchell family messages. But it was just Susan, carrying a box of basic supplies. "Thought you might need these," she said, setting it down. "Just some essentials to get you started." Inside the box, I found towels, sheets, basic toiletries, and even a few dishes. The kind of things Patricia would have sneered at, but exactly what I needed right now. These 2 women, virtual strangers yesterday, had shown me more genuine kindness than my in-laws had in 3 years of marriage. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. From this height, I could see the Space Needle in the distance, its familiar silhouette a reminder that I was still in my city, still in my element, just seeing it from a different angle. My phone, now blessedly quiet after blocking the Mitchell numbers, lit up with a new message. "Lisa, confirming my interview for tomorrow morning." The corporate world seemed very far away from this cozy apartment above a diner, but that was the point, wasn't it? Living in both worlds, being true to all parts of myself. A soft tapping from the diner's vent system created an unexpected rhythm as I laid out my interview outfit on the small bed. The one business suit Patricia hadn't chosen for me, purchased in those first months after college when I was building my career. The fabric wasn't designer quality, but it represented something more valuable, my independence. The evening settled around me as I began preparing for tomorrow. The sounds from the diner had changed. the morning coffee rush replaced by the quieter tempo of dinner service. My laptop hummed as I researched Lisa's firm, familiarizing myself with their recent projects and clients. The work energized me, reminding me of late nights at my old marketing firm when every project held possibility and promise. A gentle knock interrupted my preparation. Marie stood in the doorway, holding a plate of food. "Can't study on an empty stomach," she said, placing it on my small table. The aroma of real, honest food, not the carefully portioned, Instagram-worthy meals Patricia insisted upon, filled the apartment. As I ate, I reviewed my old portfolio, surprised at how much of myself I found in those pages. Campaigns I'd created, clients I'd helped, successes I'd earned through my own merit, not through Mitchell family connections. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I updated my presentations, adding in relevant experiences from my time in Patricia's world, recasting them in professional terms. The street below had grown quiet, Seattle's winter night settling in early. A text from my mother lit up my phone, the first contact I'd had with my parents since sending that difficult email this morning. "We're here when you need us. And Emma? We're proud of you." Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't tears of sadness. My parents had watched silently as Patricia systematically dismantled their daughter, replacing her with a perfectly polished society wife. Their gentle support now meant everything. The night deepened as I continued working, the familiar concentration settling around me like a comfortable blanket. This was who I was, someone who could lose herself in work, in creation, in building something meaningful. Patricia had tried to strip that away, to replace it with a life of carefully orchestrated social obligations and charity functions that served more as networking opportunities than actual community service. Tomorrow would be my first step back into the professional world, not as Ryan Mitchell's wife, not as Patricia's daughter-in-law, but as Emma Wilson, marketing professional. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. A siren wailed in the distance, its echo bouncing off the buildings. In my old life, such sounds were muffled by thick walls and double-paned windows, the messiness of city life kept at a careful distance. Here, in my tiny apartment above a diner, the city's pulse was immediate and real. Like everything else about my new life, it was authentic. As midnight approached, I finally closed my laptop. The interview materials were ready. My suit was pressed. My story, my real story, was prepared. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring, but for the first time in years, I was facing it as myself. The last thing I did before turning out the lights was remove my wedding ring. It caught the streetlight from outside. The diamond Patricia had selected sparkling one last time before I placed it in an envelope. Whatever else happened, I knew that ring would never again grace my finger. In the darkness, the sounds of the city created a gentle lullaby, so different from the pristine silence of the Mitchell house. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that for the first time since walking out last night, I felt completely at peace. Sometimes losing everything means finding yourself. The morning of my interview dawned with Seattle's typical winter mist clinging to the windows of my small apartment. The familiar scents of coffee and breakfast from the diner below wafted up through the floorboards, mingling with the steam from my shower as I prepared for the day ahead. In the tiny bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection, not through Patricia's critical lens, but with my own eyes. The business suit fit differently than it had 3 years ago, but it still felt more authentic than any of the designer outfits that filled my closet at the Mitchell house. My hands moved through my hair with practiced efficiency, styling it, simply but professionally. No elaborate updo that Patricia insisted upon for every public appearance, just clean lines and natural waves. A soft knock interrupted my morning routine. Marie stood in the doorway with a cup of coffee and a paper bag. "Interview breakfast," she said with a warm smile. "Everyone needs brain food on big days." Inside the bag, I found a warm croissant, Not the artisanal kind Patricia sourced from her exclusive French bakery, but fresh and real and perfect. The city was coming alive outside my windows as I gathered my portfolio and checked my appearance one final time. Professional women hurried along the sidewalks below, their heels clicking against the pavement, their breath visible in the cold, morning air. Soon I would join them, stepping back into the world I'd left behind when I married Ryan. Lisa's marketing firm occupied 3 floors of a downtown office building. As I walked through the glass doors, my heels sinking into plush carpet, I felt a surge of nostalgia for my old professional life. The receptionist looked up with a welcoming smile, not the measured assessment I'd grown accustomed to in Patricia's social circles. "Emma Wilson here to see Lisa Cooper," I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. The name felt right on my tongue. Wilson, not Mitchell. Already I was reclaiming pieces of myself. The conference room where Lisa waited offered sweeping views of Elliott Bay. 3 other people sat at the polished table: James from creative, Sarah from account management, and Michael, the CEO. They weren't wearing designer labels or dripping with status symbols. They were professionals, focused on results rather than appearances. "Emma," Lisa began, "tell us about your recent experience managing the Mitchell Family Foundation's marketing initiatives." For a moment, I hesitated. How could I explain those years without revealing the turmoil behind them? Then I remembered Susan's words about telling my truth. "The foundation taught me valuable lessons about high-stakes client relations," I began. "I learned to navigate complex family dynamics while maintaining professional standards. Every event, every campaign, required careful balance between tradition and innovation." The interview flowed naturally from there. I spoke about coordinating charity galas, managing media relations, developing community outreach programs. With each answer, I found myself transforming what had been exercises in survival into legitimate professional experiences. "Your portfolio shows strong creative instincts," James commented, studying my past campaigns. "But what interests me more is how you've adapted those skills in different environments." I thought about the countless times I'd had to creatively maneuver around Patricia's rigid expectations, finding ways to achieve goals while appearing to conform. "Adaptability is essential in marketing," I replied. "The key is maintaining your core message while adjusting your approach to suit different audiences." The interview lasted 2 hours, stretching beyond its scheduled time as we discussed potential projects and strategies. When Michael finally closed his portfolio, his expression was thoughtful. "We'll need a few days to make our decision," he said, "but I think you'll bring an interesting perspective to our team." Stepping out of the building into the weak winter sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. Whether I got the position or not, I'd proven something to myself. The professional skills I'd worked so hard to develop hadn't disappeared during my time in Patricia's world. They'd just been buried, waiting to resurface. My phone buzzed with a text from Marie. "Whatever happens, your shift starts at 4. Real work waits for no one." I smiled, appreciating her practical support. The diner job wasn't just a backup plan. It was a reminder that honest work had value, regardless of social status. Walking back through downtown Seattle, I passed the high-end boutiques where Patricia had insisted on shopping. Through the windows, I could see women like I used to be, perfectly coiffed, designer-clad, walking demonstrations of wealth and status. They looked beautiful, polished, perfect, and completely unreal. A gust of wind caught my hair, loosening a few strands from their careful arrangement. 3 days ago, this would have sent me into a panic, rushing to find a mirror and restore Patricia's version of order. Now I simply tucked the strands behind my ear and kept walking. The diner was busy when I arrived, the lunch rush in full swing. Marie took one look at my suit and pointed me toward the break room. "Get changed," she said. "Table 6 needs coffee, and Mrs. Henderson is asking for her usual." In the tiny break room, I carefully hung up my interview suit and changed into the diner's simple uniform. The fabric was sturdy cotton, designed for work rather than appearance. As I tied the apron around my waist, I caught my reflection in the small mirror. Professional Emma from this morning and waitress Emma from this afternoon. Both were real, both were valid, both were me. The afternoon passed in a blur of coffee refills, order tickets, and customer conversations. Mrs. Henderson, a regular, who reminded me of my grandmother, asked about my interview between bites of her grilled cheese. The truck driver at the counter shared stories about his cross-country routes as I topped off his coffee. A young couple on their first date blushed and stammered over their order, their awkward sweetness a reminder of simpler times. My phone remained blessedly silent in my locker. I'd blocked the Mitchell family numbers, but part of me had expected them to find other ways to reach me. Perhaps they were finally realizing I was serious about my departure. Or perhaps they were plotting their next move. Either way, I was done letting their opinions dictate my life. As my shift wound down, Lisa called. "The partners were impressed," she said without preamble, "particularly with how you've maintained your professional edge despite being away from the corporate world. We'd like to offer you the position." Joy bubbled up inside me, but it was tempered with practical considerations. "I'd like to accept," I said carefully, "but I should be upfront about something. I'm also working part-time at a local diner. It's important to me to maintain that connection." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's unusual," Lisa admitted. "But actually, it might be perfect for our small business division. Real-world experience with the kinds of businesses you'll be helping? When can you start?" Just like that, another piece of my new life fell into place. Not the life Patricia had planned for me, not the safe, controlled existence of a Mitchell wife, but something real and challenging and mine. The night shift was starting as I hung up my apron. Through the diner's windows, I could see the city, lights coming on, each one a star in Seattle's urban galaxy. 3 days ago, I'd been preparing for another perfect Mitchell family gathering. Now I was a waitress with a corporate marketing job, living above a diner, building a life on my own terms. Marie appeared beside me as I gathered my things. "Good. News?" she asked, though her knowing smile suggested she'd already guessed. "I got the job," I confirmed, "but I'm keeping my shifts here too, if that's okay." She nodded, understanding more than I'd said. Sometimes we need both kinds of success. The big victories and the small everyday ones. Keeps us grounded. Outside, the evening air was crisp and clean after the day's rain. The Space Needle glowed against the dark sky, a reminder that I was still in my city, just seeing it from a different angle. As I climbed the stairs to my tiny apartment, I could hear the comfortable sounds of the diner below, plates clinking, coffee brewing, lives being lived without pretense or performance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. I still had to face the legal complexities of divorce, the practical matters of retrieving my belongings from the Mitchell house, the emotional labor of rebuilding my life. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stop trying to be what others want and start being who we really are. The first night I truly slept well in my apartment above the diner, something woke me at 3 a.m. Not the usual sounds of late-night customers or early prep work, but complete silence. In that quiet moment, wrapped in my simple cotton sheets rather than Patricia's imported linens, I felt the weight of my emotions finally catch up to me. Padding to my small window and sock-covered feet, I watched the empty Seattle streets below. A few taxis cruised past, their yellow lights reflecting off the wet pavement. The neon sign from Joe's Diner cast a gentle red glow, creating dancing shadows on my wall. For the first time since Christmas night, I allowed myself to really feel everything. The tears came suddenly, hot and cleansing. Not tears of regret or sorrow, but of release. Years of suppressed feelings, of swallowed words, of carefully maintained composure. All of it poured out in the safety of my tiny apartment. I cried for the young woman who had slowly disappeared beneath Patricia's expectations, for the dreams I'd set aside to become the perfect Mitchell wife, for the strength it had taken to finally walk away. A soft knock at my door startled me. Marie stood there in her robe, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Heard you moving around," she said simply. "Thought you might want company." She didn't ask about my tear-stained face or comment on my messily wiped eyes. Instead, she handed me a mug of hot chocolate, not Patricia's imported drinking chocolate, but the kind made with powder and hot water, topped with tiny marshmallows that were already starting to melt. "My mother used to say that 3 a.m. is when the truth comes out," Marie said, settling into my worn armchair, "when all the distractions fade away and we're left with just ourselves." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, letting its heat seep into my fingers. "I keep thinking about who I used to be," I admitted. "Before the Mitchells, before I started trying so hard to be perfect." "And who was that?" Marie's question held no judgment, just genuine curiosity. Someone who laughed without worrying if it was too loud, who wore clothes because they felt good, not because they sent the right message, who had dreams that had nothing to do with maintaining social status. The words tumbled out, each one a revelation. Marie listened quietly, sipping her hot chocolate. Outside, the first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the sky. A delivery truck rumbled past, bringing supplies to the restaurants preparing for another day. "You know what I see?" Marie finally said, setting down her empty mug. "I see that. Woman starting to come back, every day a little more." She was right. Each small decision I'd made since Christmas night, taking the diner job, accepting the marketing position, choosing this apartment, had been a step toward reclaiming myself. The process wasn't always pretty or elegant, but it was real. The morning arrived fully as we sat there talking. Marie shared stories of her own life changes, of moments when she'd had to choose between safety and authenticity. The rising sun painted Seattle's skyline in shades of pink and gold, promising a rare, clear winter day. By the time I started my morning shift at the diner, my eyes were dry and my heart felt lighter. Every customer interaction, every coffee, refill, every small task helped ground me in the present moment. These people didn't care about social status or family connections. They just wanted good service, hot coffee, and maybe a friendly word or two. During my break, I checked my email for the first time that day. Among the usual messages was one from my old college roommate, Rachel. She'd seen Ashley's Christmas party photos on social media and noticed my absence from subsequent Mitchell family posts. Her message was simple. "Are you okay? Really okay?" Sitting in the diner's back office, surrounded by order tickets and supply invoices, I typed out my response. I told her everything, about Patricia's midnight gift reclamation, about walking away, about rebuilding my life one small step at a time. Writing it down made it feel more real, more permanent. Rachel's reply came quickly. "I've been worried about you for years. The Emma I knew in college disappeared a little more every time. I saw you. When can I visit?" The offer of friendship, real friendship, not the carefully cultivated social connections Patricia approved of, brought fresh tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become in the Mitchell world, where every relationship was measured for its social value. My shift ended just as the lunch rush was beginning. As I hung up my apron, Lisa called. "We need you to start Monday," she said without preamble. "We've landed a new client, a small local coffee roaster looking to expand. They specifically asked for someone who understands both corporate marketing and local business culture." The synchronicity made me smile. Here was a chance to bridge both my worlds, the corporate experience I'd gained before marriage, and the real-world perspective I was developing at the diner. "I'll be there," I promised. That afternoon, I treated myself to a walk through Pike Place Market. The vendors called out their wares, the fishmongers performed their famous throws, and tourists snapped photos of it all. In my Mitchell life, I'd only come here for specialty items Patricia required for her dinner parties. Now, I could simply enjoy the market's energy and authenticity. At a small flower stall, I bought myself a bunch of daisies, not the elaborate arrangements Patricia favored, but cheerful flowers that made me smile. The vendor wrapped them in paper, not designer cellophane, and the simplicity of it was perfect. Back in my apartment, I arranged the daisies in a water glass. I hadn't yet bought a vase, and sat down to plan my next steps. My calendar, once filled with social obligations and charity functions, now held different commitments: diner shifts, marketing strategy meetings, coffee with Rachel. A text from Marie lit up my phone. Dinner rush short-staffed. Extra shift available if you want. Without hesitation, I replied yes. The physical work of waiting tables helped quiet my mind, and the human connections, however brief, reminded me that life happened in small moments, not grand gestures. As I changed back into my diner uniform, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My hair was pulled back simply, my face free of the expensive cosmetics Patricia had insisted upon. I looked younger somehow, or maybe just more alive. The woman in the reflection wasn't perfect by Mitchell standards, but she was real. The dinner rush kept me too busy to think about anything except orders and refills and customer needs. A young family left me a larger tip than necessary, along with a crayon drawing from their daughter. An elderly couple shared stories of their own Christmas dramas. A businesswoman dining alone complimented my efficiency and asked about job opportunities at the diner. Each interaction reinforced what I was slowly learning: that real connections didn't require perfect clothes or proper manners or social status. They just required presence, authenticity, and basic kindness. By the time my extra shift ended, the Seattle night had settled in fully. The diner's lights created warm pools on the wet sidewalk outside, and the last customers were finishing their meals. My feet ached from the double shift, but it was an honest tiredness, earned through real work. Climbing the stairs to my apartment, I could feel my muscles protesting. In my old life, physical exhaustion was something to be avoided. It wasn't socially acceptable to show any sign of real effort. Now, I welcomed the sensation. It meant I'd worked hard, contributed something tangible to the world. The daisies on my table had opened fully, their yellow centers bright against white petals. Such simple flowers would never have been allowed in the Mitchell house, where every bloom had to make a statement about taste and affluence. But here in my tiny apartment, they were perfect. Cheerful, unpretentious, real. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with another text from Rachel. Found some old photos from college. Remember when we thought we could change the world? Maybe we still can, just differently than we planned. The message hit home. In college, I'd had big dreams, not of marrying into wealth and status, but of making my own mark on the world. Somewhere along the way, I'd let Patricia convince me that those dreams were childish, that real success meant fitting into her carefully constructed world. But here I was, starting over at 30, building something new. It wasn't the life I'd planned in college or the life Patricia had designed for me, but maybe it was better. Maybe it was exactly what I needed: a chance to combine my corporate skills with real-world experience, my professional ambitions with authentic connections. Sleep came easily that night, deep and restful. The sounds of the city, traffic, and distant sirens, the last customers leaving the diner, the gentle hum of my small refrigerator, created a lullaby of real life. No more silence in a perfectly maintained house. No more lying awake wondering if I'd met Patricia's expectations for the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, starting my corporate job, balancing diner shifts, continuing to rebuild my life. But for now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes breakdowns lead to breakthroughs, and sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding yourself. The woman who had walked out of Patricia's house on Christmas night was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone real, someone who was finally, truly, coming home to herself. The Monday morning sun cast long shadows through the corporate office windows as I set up my new workspace at Lisa's firm. My simple laptop bag sat on a sleek desk, no designer briefcase in sight. Family photos didn't decorate my desk. Instead, a single daisy in a water glass brightened the space. The marketing team bustled around me, their energy focused on projects and deadlines rather than social appearances. Lisa stopped by my desk, coffee in hand. "Our new client will be here at 10. The coffee roaster I mentioned, Emerald City Beans. Small operation, big dreams. Right up your alley." She paused, studying my face. "You ready for this?" I nodded, pulling up the research I'd done over the weekend. Between diner shifts, I'd studied local coffee culture, market trends, and community engagement strategies. This wasn't about impressing anyone with social connections. It was about delivering real results. The client meeting room felt worlds away from Patricia's carefully orchestrated charity functions. Jack and Sarah Chen, the owners of Emerald City Beans, brought their passion for coffee and community to the table, along with samples of their latest roasts. Their enthusiasm was contagious as they shared their vision of growing while maintaining their commitment to ethical sourcing and local relationships. "We need someone who gets it," Sarah explained, her hands wrapped around a cup of their signature blend. "Someone who understands both the corporate world and the importance of staying genuine." As I presented my initial thoughts on their marketing strategy, I drew on both my corporate experience and my recent insights from working at the diner. Every customer interaction, every early morning coffee rush, every conversation with regular patrons had taught me something valuable about authentic community connection. The meeting stretched past its scheduled time, ideas flowing freely. When Jack and Sarah finally left, they were grinning. "You understand what we're trying to do," Jack said, shaking my hand. "You speak both languages, business and real life." Back at my desk, I dove into developing their campaign. The work absorbed me completely, reminding me of my early career days before the Mitchell family's influence had redirected my focus. My phone remained silent in my drawer. I'd blocked not just the Mitchell family numbers, but also the constant stream of social notifications that had once dominated my days. At 4 o'clock, I changed in the office bathroom for my diner shift. A few colleagues gave me curious looks as I left wearing the practical uniform, but Lisa just smiled and nodded. She understood that this balance of corporate and real-world experience was exactly what made me valuable to clients like Emerald City Beans. The diner hummed with its usual evening energy. Regular customers asked about my day at the fancy office, genuinely interested in my dual life. Marie watched with approval as I moved easily between refilling coffee cups and making notes about marketing strategies on my order pad. "You're finding your rhythm," she observed during a quiet moment. "Both worlds have something to teach you." A group of business people came in, still wearing their office attire. One woman looked startled as she recognized me. Emma Wilson? Didn't you work at Anderson and Mills years ago?" Sarah Chen looked up from the menu she'd been studying. The coffee roaster client from this morning's meeting raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at her lips. "Ah, this explains a lot," she said. "No wonder you understand both sides of the business." The next few hours became an unexpected blend of my two worlds. Sarah and her business group settled into a booth in my section, and between taking orders and delivering plates, we continued our marketing discussion from the morning meeting. Other diners listened with interest as concepts like brand authenticity and community engagement were debated over burgers and fries. My former colleague from Anderson and Mills, Jessica, stayed long after her co-workers left. "I never understood why you disappeared into the Mitchell world," she admitted, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. You were on track to make partner at the firm. The question would have embarrassed me a week ago. Now I could answer honestly. I lost myself for a while, I said, sliding into the booth during my break. Tried to become someone else's version of successful, but sometimes life has a way of bringing you back to who you really are. Sarah joined our conversation, her business papers spread across the table alongside empty pie plates. That's exactly what we want to avoid with our company, she said. Growing without losing our soul. Corporate success without corporate artifice. As I listened to them talk, refilling coffee cups and contributing ideas between serving other customers, I realized something profound. My time in Patricia's world hadn't been wasted. It had taught me exactly what not to do, how not to lose authenticity in the pursuit of success. Marie appeared with fresh slices of pie on the house. Strategy meeting in progress, she announced with a wink, proving she understood more about marketing than she let on. The diner had become more than just my workplace. It was my classroom, my testing ground, my reality check. The night deepened around us, Seattle's lights twinkling through the windows. Sarah and Jessica exchanged business cards, a potential collaboration brewing. My order pad filled with notes about marketing ideas sparked by their conversation. This wasn't networking as Patricia understood it, all surface connections and social leverage. This was real people finding genuine common ground. My worlds weren't colliding. They were combining in ways I never expected. Each role informed the other, creating something unique and valuable. The corporate marketing executive who understood street-level customer service. The waitress who could speak the language of business strategy. As I locked up the diner that night, watching Sarah and Jessica exchange final thoughts on the sidewalk outside, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Patricia had tried to force me into a single narrow role. Instead, I was becoming something far more interesting. Someone who could move between worlds while staying true to herself. The city hummed around me, full of possibilities I was only beginning to understand. Sometimes the longest journey isn't measured in miles, but in the distance between who you were told to be and who you really are. Spring bloomed unexpectedly in Seattle. Cherry blossoms dotting the streets, I now confidently walked between my two worlds. The morning sun warmed my face as I reviewed marketing proposals at my favorite corner table in the diner, the scent of coffee mingling with the fresh ideas brewing in my mind. 6 months had passed since that Christmas night, and while the memories still stung, they had lost their power to wound. Emerald City Beans had become our firm's success story. Their authentic approach to growth, combining corporate strategy with community values, attracted other local businesses seeking similar guidance. My unique perspective, born from straddling both worlds, proved invaluable in ways I never expected. The morning quiet was broken by the chime of the diner's door. I looked up from my laptop, my heart stuttering for a moment as Ashley Mitchell walked in. She stood uncertainly in the doorway, designer handbag clutched like a shield, looking impossibly out of place among the regular breakfast crowd. Marie appeared at my side, coffee pot in hand. Want me to ask her to leave? I shook my head, squaring my shoulders. No, it's time. The protective bubble I'd built around my new life couldn't last forever. Besides, I was no longer the woman who feared Mitchell family confrontations. Ashley approached my table hesitantly, her eyes taking in my simple business attire, the open laptop, the half-eaten toast. "Emma," she said softly, "you look different." "I am different," I replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Coffee?" Marie poured a cup without waiting for Ashley's response, then retreated to watch from behind the counter. The regular customers, who had become my extended family over the past months, pretended not to observe while missing nothing. "Mom's selling the house," Ashley blurted out, wrapping manicured fingers around the ceramic mug. "After the divorce is finalized next week, she says she can't stay there. Too many memories. The news should have affected me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace. How is she? Ashley's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Lost. She doesn't understand what happened. None of us do, really. You were supposed to be. She trailed off. Perfect, I supplied. The ideal Mitchell wife? Living proof that your mother could mold anyone into her image of success? You always seemed happy, Ashley said, her voice small. At all the parties, the charity events. You played the part so well. I stirred my coffee, watching the light dance across its surface. That's all it was, Ashley. A part. A role I played until I forgot who I really was. Until your mother's Christmas gift collection reminded me in the cruelest way possible. The morning regulars drifted in and out around us. Tom, the retired teacher, nodded as he took his usual spot at the counter. Sarah Chen, now both a client and friend, waved as she picked up her daily coffee order. This was my real world now. Genuine connections, honest interactions. Ryan's seeing someone, Ashley said suddenly, watching my face for a reaction. A junior partner at his firm. Mom's already planning their engagement party. The news settled over me like a gentle rain, expected, but somehow cleansing. I hope she makes him happy, I said, meaning it, and I hope she's stronger than I was. Ashley's eyes filled with tears. I miss you, she whispered. Not the perfect sister-in-law Mom tried to create, but you. The real you that sometimes slipped through the cracks. The one who snuck candy bars during charity meetings and taught me how to make real hot chocolate. Marie appeared with a plate of her famous blueberry pancakes, setting them between us without a word. The gesture spoke volumes. In this place, even Mitchell family drama could be softened by comfort food and genuine kindness. I miss you too, I admitted. But I couldn't stay, Ashley. Your mother's midnight performance just confirmed what I'd known for months. I was disappearing, piece by piece, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The morning light streamed through the diner's windows, catching the tears on Ashley's cheeks. Outside, Seattle continued its daily rhythm. Buses, rumbling past, office workers hurrying to meetings, life moving forward in its imperfect, beautiful way. Mom's in therapy, Ashley said quietly, picking at the pancakes. Dad insisted, after she tried to rearrange the entire house at 3 a.m. last week. She keeps saying she needs to fix things, make them perfect again. Understanding washed over me. Patricia's need for control, for perfection, had finally turned inward without me as her project. Maybe that's good, I suggested. Maybe she'll learn what I did, that real life isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity. Ashley looked around the diner, taking in the worn booths, the mismatched coffee cups, the comfortable chaos of a place that prioritized substance over style. Is that why you work here, even with your fancy marketing job? I work here because it reminds me to stay real, I explained. Every coffee refill, every customer conversation, every early morning shift keeps me grounded in what matters. Success doesn't have to mean losing yourself. The door chimed again, and Lisa walked in, carrying presentation boards for our morning meeting. She assessed the situation quickly, raising an eyebrow in question. I nodded, and she joined us, adding another layer to this unexpected collision of my worlds. Ashley, this is Lisa, my boss at the marketing firm, I introduced them. Lisa, this is Ashley Mitchell, my former sister-in-law. Lisa, who knew my story, extended her hand warmly. Emma's one of our most valuable team members, she said. Her unique perspective has transformed how we approach client relationships. Ashley's eyes widened as she looked between us. You really have built a new life, she said softly. Real one. The morning continued to unfold around us as we talked. Ashley shared more family updates, the carefully maintained Mitchell facade showing cracks as Patricia struggled to maintain control in my absence. I told her about my work, both at the firm and the diner, watching understanding slowly dawn in her eyes. "Would you have dinner with me sometime?" Ashley asked as she prepared to leave. "Just us, at a regular restaurant. No designer labels required." The invitation felt different from the countless social obligations of my Mitchell life. This was Ashley reaching out as herself, not as Patricia's daughter or a Mitchell family representative. "I'd like that," I said. "But you'll have to come here sometimes too. Marie's pie is better than any 5-star dessert in the city." After Ashley left, I sat quietly, processing the interaction. Lisa and Marie flanked me, offering silent support. Outside, cherry blossoms drifted past the window, nature's reminder that beauty doesn't have to be perfectly arranged to take your breath away. "You okay?" Marie asked, refilling my coffee cup. I nodded, surprised to find it was true. "I am. You know what's strange? A year ago, that conversation would have shattered me. Now it just feels like closing a chapter properly." The rest of the day flowed naturally between my two worlds. Corporate meetings where my diner learned insights proved invaluable. Evening shifts where marketing strategies emerged from conversations with customers. Each role enriching the other, creating something unique and authentic. As I closed the diner that night, watching the last customers leave, I thought about Patricia's house going on the market. The perfect showcase of Mitchell family success would soon belong to someone else. But the real success story wasn't about houses or social status or perfectly curated appearances. The real success was standing, here, keys in hand, looking at my reflection in the diner's window. A woman who had lost everything only to find herself. Who had learned that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as midnight reclamations and shattered illusions. 1 year after that fateful Christmas night, I stood in front of the mirror in my new apartment, adjusting my blazer before heading to work. Not Patricia's version of appropriate attire, but my own professional style that reflected both confidence and authenticity. The space around me was modest, but wholly mine. Family photos mixed with local art, comfortable furniture alongside carefully chosen pieces, a perfect blend of my dual worlds. The morning sun streamed through windows that overlooked a bustling Seattle street, not the manicured lawns of the Mitchell estate. Through my open window, I could hear the early sounds of the city awakening. Delivery trucks, coffee shops opening, real life unfolding in all its imperfect beauty. My phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Big presentation today. The Chen account has attracted 3 more local businesses. Your two-world perspective is exactly what they're looking for." Emerald City Beans had become our firm's flagship success story. Under my guidance, their growth remained true to their authentic roots while expanding into new markets. Other local businesses took notice, seeking that same balance between success and soul. Marie had promoted me to weekend manager at the diner, understanding that my corporate success didn't mean leaving behind the place that had given me sanctuary. If anything, each role strengthened the other. My marketing strategies carried the wisdom of countless customer interactions, while my professional skills helped modernize the diner's operations without sacrificing its character. The intercom buzzed, my new morning routine. Rachel, my college roommate who had moved to Seattle 2 months ago, waited with coffee. Our friendship, rekindled after years of Mitchell-imposed distance, had blossomed into a daily reminder of who I used to be and who I'd become. "Ready for the big day?" she asked, handing me a cup from our favorite local coffee shop. Not Patricia's approved supplier, but better for its authenticity. I nodded, gathering my things. The morning light caught the bare ring finger on my key, left hand, no longer strange in its emptiness. The divorce had been finalized months ago, a surprisingly quiet ending to what had once seemed an unbreakable bond. The last time I'd seen Ryan was at the courthouse, both of us signing papers that dissolved our marriage. He'd looked older somehow, worn down by his mother's escalating need for control. "I'm sorry," he'd said as we left, though whether he meant for Christmas night or for our entire marriage remained unclear. The front steps of my building offered a view of Pike Place Market coming to life. Vendors setting up stalls, early morning shoppers seeking the freshest produce, tourists already gathering to watch the famous fish throws. This was my Seattle now. Real, vibrant, unfiltered by Patricia's lens of social acceptability. Rachel linked her arm through mine as we walked. "Did you hear? Patricia's putting the house up for sale." The news settled softly, like the morning mist around us. Ashley mentioned she might. Apparently, it's too big for one person now that Ryan's moved out. The Mitchell family had splintered in unexpected ways after my departure. Ryan moved into a downtown apartment, refusing his mother's attempts to decorate it. Ashley started therapy, exploring her own relationship with perfectionism. Even Richard, the perpetually silent patriarch, had found his voice in family meetings. My heels clicked against the sidewalk as we approached the office building housing Lisa's firm. The security guard, Mike, greeted me by name, not as Mrs. Mitchell, but as Emma Wilson, marketing executive and weekend diner manager. Both titles carried equal weight in my new world. The elevator ride gave me a moment to check my presentation notes one last time. Today's clients were local business owners, much like Sarah and Jack Chen, seeking growth without losing their essence. My unique perspective, understanding both corporate strategy and street-level authenticity, had become my greatest professional asset. Lisa met me at my office door, her smile wide. "The Chen's new location is packed every morning. Your campaign perfectly captured their spirit while expanding their reach." My office reflected my dual life: professional certificates alongside candid photos from the diner, market research reports next to handwritten customer feedback cards. A single daisy brightened my desk, a daily reminder that beauty doesn't require elaborate arrangement. The morning unfolded in a series of meetings, each one reinforcing the value of my unconventional path. Local business owners responded to my understanding of their struggles to maintain authenticity while growing. Corporate clients appreciated my insights into genuine customer connection. During lunch, I walked to the diner, exchanging my blazer for an apron to help with the rush. Regular customers greeted me warmly, many now also clients at the firm. Marie watched with approval as I moved easily between refilling coffee cups and discussing marketing strategies. The afternoon sun was setting when my phone buzzed with an unexpected name, Patricia Mitchell. My hands didn't shake as I read her message. "The house goes on the market tomorrow. There are some things here that belong to you. Real things, from before, if you'd like them." I thought carefully before responding. The last year had taught you, me, the value of boundaries, of protecting the life I'd built while remaining open to genuine change. "I'll come by this evening," I wrote back, "just for a few minutes." Rachel insisted on driving me, her presence a buffer against old anxieties. The Mitchell house looked smaller somehow, its perfect facade unable to mask the emptiness within. Patricia opened the door herself. No staff remained to maintain her version of proper protocol. She'd aged in the past year. The strain of maintaining perfection etched more deeply in her face. "Emma," she said softly, stepping back to let us in. "You look well." The house smelled of cleaning products and cardboard boxes. It's perfect. Order disrupted by the reality of change. Patricia led us to the study, where several boxes sat labeled in her precise handwriting. "Emma, before." Inside, I found pieces of my past. College photos, early career awards, letters from friends, all the genuine artifacts of my life that had been deemed unsuitable for a Mitchell wife. Patricia watched silently as I looked through them, her hands twisting together in an uncharacteristic display of uncertainty. "I should have seen it," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "How much you dimmed, year by year." My therapist says. She paused, the words clearly difficult. She says, I was trying to create another version of myself through you. Perfect, controlled, safe. I closed the box gently, looking around the room that had once filled me with such anxiety. We can't control life into perfection, Patricia. We can only live it authentically. She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. Some habits die hard. Ryan's happier now, still dating that lawyer. She doesn't try to please me. Good, I said simply. Maybe she'll help him find his own authenticity. The goodbye was brief, both of us understanding that some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. But as Rachel and I drove away, the boxes of my past secure in her trunk, I felt an unexpected lightness. The Mitchell house would soon belong to another family, its perfect facade perhaps sheltering different dreams. The evening shift at the diner was busy, life flowing around me in its beautiful, chaotic way. Regular customers shared their stories between bites of Marie's famous pie. Sarah Chen dropped by with news of their latest coffee blend, inspired by our late-night strategy sessions. As I closed up, wiping down counters and counting receipts, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was neither the uncertain young professional who'd first caught Ryan's eye, nor the perfectly polished Mitchell wife I'd become. She was something entirely new, authentic, complex, real. My phone lit up with messages from both worlds. Lisa confirming tomorrow's client meetings, Marie arranging next week's schedule, Rachel planning our weekend hike. Each notification represented a genuine connection, a life built on truth rather than appearance. The Seattle night wrapped around me as I walked home, the Space Needle illuminated against the dark sky. Street musicians played on corners, their music mixing with traffic sounds and distant ferry horns. This was my city now, experienced directly rather than from behind tinted car windows. My apartment welcomed me with its lived-in comfort. The boxes from Patricia sat unopened by the door. Tomorrow was soon enough to sort through old memories. Tonight was for appreciating the present, for being grateful for the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, Patricia's midnight gift, reclamation had seemed like the end of my world. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more valuable, the gift of finding myself, of building a life that needed no elaborate wrapping or careful curation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.